PeterProject.com. Go to the one on Peter.
I'm trying to turn my computer off, sorry.
I just wasn't sure if I was supposed to be dancing or singing. I was waiting for the cue.
You're good.
Okay, so I know you won't be able to, you won't even be able to hear it, will you? Let's see how loud this goes.
Should be mostly up.
We're going all the way. All right, let's see how it goes. If it's, you might have to watch it on your own later. We'll see. I see, like, that's not good.
Might need to reload it. 'Cause it was...
Let's try that.
There you go. Maybe.
No? And if we don't get to watch it now, it's fine. You can get it on your own time. We've got some spinning. Guess we don't have a great internet connection.
Did you click it? The play button there?
Yeah, I did.
Apostles to guide.
Let's see. Maybe it'll download as we're going. All right. If we don't get to that, that'll be your homework. Go back and watch this, and it'll give you the whole picture. And I tell you what, this is so deep. Even though it's 8 minutes, you'll want to watch it again. Because you'll be like, I think I got it, but let me get some more. And every time you go back to it, you'll get more. So maybe we won't get this.
The first letter of Peter. His name was Shimon, or Simon, when he first became a follower of Jesus, and he was part of the inner circle of the 12 disciples. When he made his confession that Jesus was the Messiah, Jesus changed his name to...
Hello? That's weird. Oh.
And that's what happened. Remember the early chapters. Eventually, Peter was called to carry the...
Yeah, I'm not feeling that this is going to be a great experience for you guys. So, you guys go back and watch that on your own, and I'll save 8 minutes and go on to the TED Talk one on distinction. So I call it a TED Talk because that's to limit me to 20 minutes, which I've never tried before. So we'll see if it works. So I call this the fight for distinction. And distinction is kind of an interesting word. I don't use it very much. What does distinction mean? Maybe I think of distinguished. What's that? Unique. I like that word. Any other word?
Separate.
Okay. Special. Standing apart. Maybe set apart. Specific. Okay. Okay. An interesting example. Somebody was asking me, when did my German relatives move to the United States? And the name Kreider is incredibly popular. So like one of the most popular names in the city of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Anybody know what Lancaster, Pennsylvania is famous for besides the outlets? The Amish, okay? Pennsylvania Dutch, we call them, right? And so it turns out that my relatives were Mennonites. So the Pennsylvania Dutch is Amish and Mennonites. Mennonites, not quite as strict as Amish, but all from the same group, which were Anabaptists. Anabaptist means to baptize again. And during the days of the Protestant Reformation, in Germany and several other countries, there was heavy persecution against anybody who didn't follow the state church. So Luther was one of the first successful groups to break away from the Catholic Church. Because if you started teaching something, they had a way of dealing with false teachers, a little bit like 2 Peter 2. And what they would do with false teachers is they would label them as heretics and kill them. And after they were dead, they no longer spread as much. But Anabaptists were considered this heretical group because they taught things like personal conversion. They believed that individuals should have their own personal faith, that they should be immersed in water as adults, that they shouldn't just listen to the state church. and that the church should stop killing people, whether it was going to war against another country or just killing everybody they labeled as a heretic. And of course, we know that they were from Bavaria. And I told Beth, she's like, I don't know if I want to go to Bavaria. I'm like, after you see that picture, you might want to go to Bavaria. That's pretty. I'd like to go to Bavaria. And of course, Bavaria is a beautiful country in part of Germany. But the persecution got really strong. They're like, oh, you're into baptizing? We'll baptize you. We're going to hold you under the water until you die. And they would drown them in water because they believed in immersion for adults. And it was a vicious persecution against these people. Now, who were these people? So these people moved in 1715. My relative Jacob Kreider moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and settled in the United States. And they're known for what kind of things? How they dress, right? They're kind of plain clothes people is another name for them. The women cover their heads. The men are very simple. They don't have the latest gadgets. They're not into technology. And, they rejected the new life. They adopted a simple lifestyle. They're big on farming. They're really big on having a morality and living it out and instilling it in their children. And even though they allow their children to go on this wild stage where they get to choose, do you want to be Amish or not? And they get to drive cars and everything like that when they're teenagers. A high percentage of them come back because they appreciate the conviction, morality, and the lifestyle that their parents have brought. It's pretty powerful. And of course, here's they're baptized people for immersion as adults, as conversion. Kind of interesting. What's this? Barn raising. Why is that so important? Why was that so cool?
Everybody participated.
Okay, can you imagine? There's a need in the community. Maybe the barn burnt down, or maybe this is a new family, they just got married, and we got to build them a barn. So they hire a contractor, and no! The whole community comes together because they built a community.
Right.
They had no one's possessions were claimed as their own, but they all came together so that everyone had what they needed. What does that sound like? And it's interesting, even though they're not very big on technology, they probably build the best barns in the world. And Amish furniture is known as the highest quality. If you want to say it's good furniture, you say, oh, the Amish built it. You might be lying, but, no, you wouldn't want to lie, right? But the Amish, when they build something, it's known to be quality. There's a conviction here. And why do I bring up this group? I really believe that there was a distinctiveness about this community.
Right.
And people recognize it. Now, we all mock it a little bit. Oh, look at the Amish. In their horse and buggies, in their plain clothes. I mean, hey, they don't even have probably an iPhone. Maybe they do. I don't know if they allow that. But there was a guy, 2,000 years ago, formed his own community. And if you picture exactly what Jesus did, the Jewish culture was built around these strong family communities. And so your extended family was your community. Every need that any individual had was a need that the community had. When Jesus started calling people out of that community, he had to build a similar structure. And so the Christian community in the first century had to provide those needs that the community had. So these house churches were not just a different place to meet on midweek. They were a form of community. They were a ministry. They were where your needs were met. And these former strangers who looked different than you and maybe were brought up different than you had an even deeper conviction to build a community than your family, who, it's kind of funny how even those families, they're all it doesn't matter whether it's church or family, it's all dysfunctional, okay? Let's not say, oh, the church family's perfect and your physical family's messed up. I tried that and it didn't work. But they built something that was based on a choice that they made. There's a word that they sort of hijacked, and it became their own word, and where it's love is a choice that you make. The word is agape. It's not a feeling. It's not a brotherly love. Not a nice feeling we have together. It's not eros, some kind of sexual love. It's the love where you make a decision to put the other person's needs in front of your own. That's what my first love book is all about. But so Jesus had this incredible community. Even though they were often poor, homeless, without careers, they were powerful because of their love and their godliness, and they produced fruit. What is fruit? It's the reproductive organ of the tree. If you don't have a seed, you don't produce more trees, right? Well, fruit, if you think about it, is reproduction of God's Spirit in other people. Spiritual fruit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, the things that Peter later on says in chapter 2 Peter 1 is what keeps you faithful. That's the fruit of the Spirit that is exactly what, it's God reproducing himself in us. And that's what he wants to reproduce in other people. So when Peter opens his letter, he starts talking about this battle to create this community and to sustain it. And so I call it a fight for our identity. If we're going to be Christians, how are we going to be different? How are we going to build a community like this? And don't think it's easy. Right? Even in the church, where we really should have an advantage over everybody else in building this community, it still takes everybody making a decision, an agape decision to say, I'm going to put other people's needs in front of my own.
That's right.
Otherwise, our community's pretty lame. If we have a house church group, or you call them family groups, if you have a family group and people don't show up, it's pretty lame. You bring your friend, oh, here's my best friends. None of them showed up. Yeah, they still love me. I think they said they love me. That's lame, right? We want to be a group that stands out.
Right.
But we've got to fight for our identity. So what does Peter do? In chapter 1, as we talked about, it says, to God's chosen strangers in the world. He opens his letter by addressing us as people who don't belong here.
Right.
We actually don't even belong here. You ever feel awkward, like you're in a situation like, I just don't belong here.
Yeah.
You move to a new place. We were in Cambodia when I wrote this book. I'm telling you what, I do not understand that language. They would translate. I'd say something, or maybe sharing or something, and I'd say, oh, good morning. They'd be like, I was like, all I said was good morning, And I felt, then you would sit down and talk to them. They try to speak English. Of course, I had no Khmer. And trying to connect with them was difficult. I felt a distance. I felt, how can I be effective here? And sometimes we have that feeling of being an alien. And Peter addresses that. He talks to these scattered, sanctified, suffering strangers. They're scattered across Asia, Bithynia, Cappadocia. They're sanctified, meaning chapter 2, when we talked about they're holy people. They're a royal priesthood. They've been set apart by God. God considers us special. They're suffering all kinds of trials. It's not easy what they're doing. And the best that they can do is just say we're strangers. The Bible Knowledge Commentary defines this as it defines 1 Peter as a handbook written for ambassadors in a hostile foreign land. So imagine if the U.S. was to take a delegation and send it into the middle of China without maybe the advantage of having Jesse who could speak the language and understand the culture. And we're trying to convey what Jesus is like, or, America trying to convey something, I don't know what we're doing there. But as Christians, when we go into a country like that and we try to convey who Jesus is, it's a really difficult job. And we feel that as aliens and strangers. And two things that are interesting about this. The word that he uses indicates that they're not they don't belong to that country. They're foreign nationals. Okay, so they're foreigners. So we're not Americans anymore. And it's very interesting because if you get around the evangelicals, they are so patriotic.
Yeah.
They're like, God bless America.
Yeah.
It's God's country.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I appreciate, I love America and all that. I'm all for that. But God loves all nations.
That's
right. Preach.
God is not American. Write that down. The other thing he emphasizes here is that we're in a temporary residence.
Yep.
I love the picture of, we were staying at the Courtyard Marriott. Now imagine if we went shopping at Walmart today and we bought a new rug and we didn't like the TV, it's kind of small, so we got a big large screen TV. We start moving it into the hotel. And they see us moving this furniture in, we're replacing the bed out. We're like, what are you doing? Wait, we're temporary residents. And you know what happens is, because it is kind of comfortable here, we make our home here. We blend in with the culture. We blend in and we get these pressures, whether it's at work or with our kids or at our job, at school.
Come on, Brett.
Where we start to act like we live here. Instead of remembering that it's not the long-term plan. Our identity comes from a new birth. That, in 1 Peter 1:3 it says, He's given us a new birth into a living hope through His resurrection, into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. So there's two things that he starts out. He starts out with this new birth, saying your identity is completely different. Now you're a Christian, and you have to fight for that identity. That's my point here. But he also gets them thinking about their inheritance that will never perish, spoil, or fade. Wants them thinking about heaven. Your actual country is way better than this. Where you're headed is so much better. But isn't it hard to keep that at the front of your thoughts?
Yeah.
And the reason is we're under attack.
Okay.
Satan is like a roaring lion wanting to devour each one of us. And so, chapter 2 starts to warn them to rid themselves of here are the satanic attacks on you. Malice. Just evil thoughts. Don't they come into our minds, right? We get mad at somebody. They cut us off or they do something to us. We don't like it. Deceit. I want to look better than I am. Very tempting when you speak publicly. You want to look good. Very tempting when you're at work. You don't go into work and I just like to tell you how bad of an employee I actually really am. You don't do that. We're tempted, even in the church, to look better than we should. Deceit. Hypocrisy. Maybe something happened. You don't want to talk about it because you don't want to show the inconsistency. Hey, we're all, in some ways, hypocrites. We just got to be honest about it.
Come on, bro.
The way you fight hypocrisy is honesty.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly.
Envy. We want what the world has. Well, it looks so nice. I'd like a new car. I'd like a better house. Slander of every kind. Dear friends, I urge you as aliens and strangers to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. I don't really like war movies. What's the most recent war movie you've seen? I don't know.
Dunkirk.
Dunkirk, you saw it? I didn't see Dunkirk. I like the one where it's that ridge. What's it called? Where the guy... Hacksaw Ridge. That was a powerful movie. But war is just... I went out and played paintball with the guys. And it was crazy how much adrenaline just got in my body. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to get hit. I'm going to die. And you get this incredible rush, and it's scary, right? But we don't like to admit that we're in a constant war. That the enemy's constantly on us, and he's working on us. He's chipping away at our convictions. He's attacking us. And if we're going to maintain our conviction as aliens and strangers, we've got to recognize the war and fight for our identity.
That's right.
I love the humility of this picture. Like newborn babes, crave pure spiritual milk so that you may grow up in your salvation. Now that we've tasted the Lord's good. There is a humility that Peter talks about in this chapter, and then in chapter 5 when he starts talking about humble yourselves before the Lord in his mighty hand. And the whole idea of submission. To me, humility is very simple. It's admitting how much you need God, and then how much you need people. You may be praying, God help me, God help me. And all he did was put these knuckleheads in your life. Wait, that was the answer to your prayer. Open your eyes, because he put the person in here who can help you. That's what this church is. That's what we're able to get our help.
Amen.
So how do we persevere during suffering? You know, it gives a lot of practice. Let's talk about imitating Jesus. Isn't it awesome that we can look at Jesus' example? Sometimes it's overwhelming, but it is awesome that we can look at him as a man. Arm yourselves with a new attitude. You know, I have to admit that a lot of times I have a bad attitude, a wrong attitude. I have to rebuke myself and just say, wait, that is not the right attitude. And okay, sometimes it's just bend and get it out and confess and then repent. But you need a new attitude. And then pray. It's really interesting. The fastest growing churches in the world right now are in Indonesia.
Amen.
And I went to a church builders workshop with Harlem. And it was so simple what he said. He said, you know, you need to pray that you're going to meet people that are open.
That's it.
It's like, that it? It's like, well, then you got to be looking for them.
Sure.
But he's like, how much are you really praying that you will be those people? That you'll be ready to reach out to the people that are around you. Just build community and be there for him.
Amen.
But he said, it has to start with prayer. Because otherwise our hearts aren't ready. Prayer and loving each other deeply. And then humble yourself under God's mighty hand. Because we do have an enemy. I'm going to close out with fighting for idealism. I'm reading a book, or I just finished reading a book called Healing of a Wounded Idealist. If you've been around for a while, you may have started as an idealist, but what happens is you get wounded. And what do you become?
Cynic.
A cynic. Oh, I've heard that before. I tried that before. It didn't work. We were having our workshop in Northern Virginia, and we talked about all these plans. We're going to change this. And what happened was we basically got kicked out of our facility. Oakton High School is going through a renovation, so we had to move to a place that's not as convenient. And so we're doing a lot more house churches, and it's a completely different way of doing the ministry. And one of the brothers who's a house church leader, he said, how is this going to be any different than any other year?
Right.
Nice.
Wow. I mean, at least he was honest enough to say it. I was a little shocked that he was that open in front of the group.
Okay.
But we all started to admit that we felt a little bit of that. And then start talking about, you know, maybe our goal's wrong. Sometimes our goal is we want to grow by this number or do, you know, do this. And really maybe our goal should be to have the right attitude, to have a great heart before God.
Yeah, amen. Come on.
To maintain our distinctiveness in the midst of what's going on and to do our best to build that in this community.
Amen.
And if we do that, God will bless it eventually. So I got a lot out of that book. There's a lot of other scriptures. I'm probably way out of time. 21 minutes, yep. So, you read the book. Keep reading it. I'm going to close out with a story about this book. Anybody read this book? Okay. David Berceau. You like the book, right? So David Berceau was a Methodist, and he's a patent lawyer. Not a ministry person, but he's a lawyer. But he started to read about the early Christians. And going to the Methodist church, he was looking at his, denomination, Methodist church, and he's comparing it to the first century Christians. Guess what he found? It's nothing like it. He's like, wait a second. What are we doing? And so he started his search looking for what group do I want to connect with. And he met with Doug Jacoby. And he talked and visited some of the services for the ICOC. And you know what he loved? He loved our doctrine, because he's like, wow, you know, he believes in baptism as a conversion for an adult. He loved our zeal. He walked into the meetings, he's like, wow, people really love each other in this church. But he decided to become a Mennonite. I'm like, Doug, why did he do that? Why did he become a Mennonite? He said, you know, the ICSC is still very worldly. The people blend in with everybody a lot. They go to violent movies and their convictions about just buying all the latest things, and they're just like their neighbors. I'm not saying that everything he's saying is right. It's not Bible. But I'm like, wow. Here's an observation from a guy that's objective on our movement. And I'm like, I'm guilty. I'm guilty. I go to work, you know, I just like you guys, I work a full-time job. I'm not in the ministry. I'm, you know, like you, I'm in the ministry, right? We're in the ministry of Jesus. But I'm not full-time ministry. And when I go to work, how can people tell that I'm different?
Amen.
And it really has to be that we bring in who we are at work. And I share with them, you know, they all have copies of my book and my daughter's book. And this is who I am. And this is what I believe we've got to do if we're going to fight for our identity and fight for this whole concept of being distinct. So in looking at Jesus, he was despised and rejected by men. He understood being an alien. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, though the world did not recognize him, he came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. You know, we're going to be rejected. It's not going to go super well. You know, I'm not going to say, you know, oh, everybody you talk to is going to get baptized will just start a new video on Hot News or whatever. But I believe that the battle is worth it, and our goal has to be to be aliens and strangers.
Amen.
So that's my TED Talk. I did it in 22 minutes, 24.